The Chicago Blackhawks look to pick up back-to-back victories for the first time since early December tonight against the Anaheim Ducks. And on today's episode, I'll talk about whether Connor Bedard can keep up his aggressive mentality from Sunday and whether Andreas Athanasiou will make his long-awaited return. All that and plenty more right here on Locked On Blackhawks.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome on into another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Go and give me a follow on X at Jack Bushman2, and make sure to also go and follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And just a quick reminder, if you happen to be watching this on YouTube right now, to please go and smash that like button, comment down below, and subscribe to the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel. If you're an audio listener and tuning in through Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure to go and rate and review the show as well, preferably with a 5-star rating. Those are always great. And I got to let you know, today's episode is brought to you by the Sleeper app, the go-to platform for daily fantasy sports. And right now, if you use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps, you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit with Sleeper. All right, good morning, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. And following their 7-4 victory over the Arizona Coyotes on Sunday, the Blackhawks back in action tonight, continuing on their 4-game homestand with the second meeting of the season against the Anaheim Ducks, the team that currently sits in third to last place in the NHL standings. And you have to remember back to December 7th to the first time these two teams met this season, which actually led to a 1-0 Blackhawks win. Peter Mrazek stopped all 37 shots that he faced for his lone shutout of the season. Philip Kurashev with the lone tally of the game for the game-winning goal. And funny enough, that was actually part of the last time the Chicago Blackhawks won back-to-back games. They defeated the Anaheim Ducks 1-0 at the United Center on December 7th, and then just 2 days later defeated the St. Louis Blues 3-1 at the UC as well. That's the last time the Blackhawks have won 2 consecutive games, believe it or not, Hawks fans, over 3 months ago. So, hey, maybe, it's a good sign that they're taking on the Ducks here once again. It's the last time they were able to pick up 2 wins. Anaheim was involved, and they actually have a pretty good history against this Ducks team over the last handful of seasons. So hopefully they'll be able to keep that going here this evening. It would be nice to see this team pick up 2 consecutive wins. I know the guys in the locker room would really enjoy that just because of all the losing that they've done this season and being unable to kind of string anything together. Would be nice, certainly, to see that on home ice tonight as the Hawks continue on with their 4-game homestand. But a couple of things to be watching for this evening when the Hawks take on the Ducks. That's a 7:30 p.m. Central Time puck drop, by the way, for those who are unaware. First and foremost, though, does Connor Bedard keep up that same aggressive mentality that we've seen from him in the last 2 games? And I personally think he's going to be able to. If we've learned anything from Connor Bedard, he only gets hungrier and hungrier, and I don't think he's going to let the success that he had against the Coyotes with a 3-point night in that 7-4 win kind of change his aggressive mindset. I think he's still going to be rather hungry this evening, and he just was so feisty and so tenacious all throughout that game, even in the opening 20 minutes before he had that 3-point explosion there in the middle frame. I thought it was really clear that he was playing super feisty, getting engaged in a lot of one-on-one puck battles and was mostly winning them, which you love to see from an undersized 18-year-old. He just wears his heart on his sleeve, man. He gives it everything he has out there. So yeah, I'd be rather surprised if we don't see Connor Bedard trying to shoot the puck like he has been over these last couple of games. And I would personally like to see the entire Blackhawks team carry on with that mantra. And I think one thing that's been noticeable in particular over the last handful of games, I mentioned this on yesterday's episode, the defensemen having that shoot first mentality. The Hawks haven't really gotten a lot out of their defensemen offensively this season, right? Kevin Korchinski is their leading goal scorer on the back end with only 3 tallies, and I believe the Blackhawks as a team only have 11 goals from their defensemen, but they've been getting a much better mentality with the puck on their sticks on the back end. We saw Seth Jones pick up 4 assists on Sunday in that win over Arizona. A couple of them were on rebound opportunities. Alex Vlasic had an assist via that way as well. Colin Blackwell scored 2 goals in his hat trick off of rebounds. So would really like to see that continue out of the Blackhawks, not just from their superstar and Connor Bedard, but from the rest of the team and especially the defensemen on the back end. And then the third thing to watch for is, will Andreas Athanasiou get back into the lineup? Will he finally make his long-awaited return here this evening? And last week, it was sounding like there was a possibility for him to make his return against the Washington Capitals in D.C. That didn't end up happening. And then he also wasn't just good enough yet in order to play in the back end of the back-to-back on Sunday against the Arizona Coyotes. So hopefully tonight is the night. It seems like it would be trending in that direction, but I am recording this prior to the morning skate, so we don't have any confirmation one way or the other. But yeah, Athanasiou still obviously hasn't played since November 9th in Tampa Bay. Blackhawks only have 1 road win since that point, and they could really use his speed and wheels back into their top 9 forward group. So hopefully tonight is the night for Andreas Athanasiou to make his return. It sounded like they were thinking he was going to be good enough to play at least in one of the games over the weekend. So I personally would be a little bit shocked if he's not ready to go tonight. But as far as the Blackhawks lineup, I don't think we're going to see any changes in the top 6 with Nick Foligno, Connor Bedard, and Philip Kurashev rolling good right now as the Blackhawks top line. Colin Blackwell coming off of a hat trick along with Jason Dickinson, who I thought kind of quietly had a really solid outing against the Arizona Coyotes, did a lot of good work along the boards and down low and just maintaining puck possession, scrapping hard, as he always seems to do in that one. And then Joey Anderson, obviously, on the right wing as well. He's been rather solid all year in that shutdown second line role for the Hawks. On the third line is where I do believe we could see Andreas Athanasiou along with Tyler Johnson and Taylor Radish. I would just have to guess Sanford would probably be the odd man out if AA is able to go here this evening. And then Ryan Donato, who I also thought had a really solid game against the Coyotes, will skate on the 4th line with Mackenzie Entwistle and Reese Johnson. This morning, though, could be the first time we see Landon Slaggert skating with his new NHL teammates. As Luke Richardson told the media following Slaggert signing his ELC, if you want to hear more of my thoughts on Slaggert and his deal and what his role could be and ceiling at the NHL level with the Blackhawks, make sure to go and check out yesterday's episode. I dove really heavy into the Landon Slaggert ELC. But yeah, he's going to be joining the team here today. He's not going to be playing tonight against the Anaheim Ducks, but after he gets some reps in practice and has some video sessions with the coaching staff, sounds like he could play either Friday night when the Hawks take on the Los Angeles Kings, or in my opinion, at latest Sunday when they battle with the San Jose Sharks. What's going to be interesting, though, is where Landon Slaggert is going to jump into the lineup. There's obviously going to have to be another odd man out if the Blackhawks want him to be playing right away. I would probably guess Reese Johnson is the odd man out, but I also wouldn't be surprised to see Taylor Radish bumped down in the lineup a little bit because it's just been such a struggle for him. I now believe he has 1 point in his last 31 games, hasn't scored a goal since December 14th against the Seattle Kraken. I wouldn't be super stunned to see Landon Slaggert jump on that third line and Taylor Radish maybe get bumped down a spot to the 4th line, or maybe Slaggert ends up skating on that 4th line with Donato and Entwistle. I do ultimately think, though, he's going to be on either the 3rd or 4th line whenever he does make his debut. And then as far as the rest of the Blackhawks lineup tonight, no real surprises. They only have 6 active defensemen, 6 defensemen on their active roster, with Vlasic and Jones, Korchinski and Megna, and then Jared Tenorti and Nikita Zaitsev. I envision this being a Peter Mrazek game. I know Soderblom does have back-to-back victories, but he did allow 4 in that game into the Coyotes, and I think this is just a good little get-right spot for Peter Mrazek, and then maybe you let Soderblom go on Friday whenever they take on the Kings. I personally am going to guess so that's going to be Mrazek, and then Soderblom will go when the Blackhawks take on the San Jose Sharks this Sunday. And speaking of the San Jose Sharks, a little Tankathon standings update here, Blackhawks fans. The Hawks, even though they did defeat the Coyotes on Sunday night, still sit in dead last in the standings with a 17-43-5 record and have 39 points through 65 games. They are tied with the San Jose Sharks once again with 39 points, but they do hold the advantage in points percentage, currently sitting at .300. The Sharks, as I mentioned, also have 39 points, but they're 16-40-7 and have only played 63 games, so that gives them a .310 points percentage. It's getting kind of tight here, Blackhawks fans. And then Anaheim, just for reference as to what they're up to, they're 23-38-3. As I mentioned, the third worst record in the NHL. They have 49 points through 64 games with a .383 points percentage and 18 games left on their schedule. So still a pretty sizable gap between Anaheim and the Blackhawks and the San Jose Sharks. Still appears to be a two-horse race in my opinion, and a lot of meaningful games between all of these teams over the next couple of weeks. The Hawks have two meetings against San Jose coming in the next 12 days, and then have two contests against the Anaheim Ducks as well here in the next 9. All right, there is my preview of tonight's matchup with the Anaheim Ducks at the United Center. Coming up in just a moment, I'll talk a little bit about the biggest winners from the 2024 NHL trade deadline. But first, I need to talk to you all about Sleeper. A new NHL season brings all sorts of possibilities. Connor Bedard could be on his way. He's going to be trying to push for 30 goals in the hunt for the 2024 Calder Trophy for NHL Rookie of the Year. Austin Matthews looks like he's going to be taking home the Rocket Richard and could even be scoring 70 this season. And how about the Vancouver Canucks? They could be winning the President's Trophy for the top team in the NHL, and you could be winning right alongside them by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. And Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy contests. And it's so simple. All you have to do is select whether studs like Nathan McKinnon, Connor McDavid, or Connor Bedard will record more or less than their Sleeper projections for goals, assists, points, shots, plus, minus, or more in any given game. And again, Sleeper offers you the chance to win 100 times your cash. So start paying attention, make the right picks, and you could be winning real big. And right now, you can also use the promo code LOCKDOWNNHL in all caps to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit with Sleeper. That's right, promo code LOCKDOWNNHL in all caps to get up to a $100 match. And if you're wanting to, you can go and see Sleeper's terms of use right now for more details. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, the Blackhawks take on the Anaheim Ducks at 7:30 p.m. Central Time tonight at the United Center. It's the second of 3 meetings between these two teams this season, and the first in the next 9 days, And you can catch all of the action of the Blackhawks hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. All you have to do is go and search Blackhawks. All right, segment 2, with the 2024 NHL trade deadline having wrapped up last week, we know the Chicago Blackhawks only made one move, and that was sending Anthony Beauvillier to the Nashville Predators in exchange for a 2024 fifth-round pick. But with the deadline not being all that exciting for us Blackhawks fans and a lot of other stuff going down, I wanted to go over some of the most notable trades and who I thought were the biggest winners coming out of the 2024 NHL trade deadline, now that we're down to basically just 1 month left here in the regular season. And there were a lot of crazy moves happening, particularly in the last couple of days. But in my opinion, none were bigger than the late buzzer beater made by the Vegas Golden Knights to acquire Tomas Hertl from the San Jose Sharks. And Hertl wasn't really even someone who was on the trade block necessarily for San Jose, given that he had just signed an 8-year extension a couple of years ago with this team. But Vegas had an ace up their sleeve, as they seemingly always do, and the last move, one of the last moves made before the deadline, arguably winds up being the biggest as Vegas adds Tomas Hertl to their roster. And it really, I didn't think, cost them all that much. Basically, Vegas was able to get Tomas Hertl and 2/3 in exchange for a 2025 first round pick and David Edstrom, who was a first round pick for Vegas in last year's loaded 2023 NHL draft. All San Jose had to do was retain 17% of Tomas Hertl's contract, which has 6 more years left on it at the conclusion of the season. So a big time get for the Vegas Golden Knights. They just continue deadline in and deadline out to go and add major pieces. They catch a lot of flack for how they go about things on LTIR and just some of their business and whatnot. But man, it has to be very fun to be a fan of the Vegas Golden Knights because Kelly McCrimmon, they just go for it year in and year out. They're not really worried about it. They understand they have a window for opportunity right here, right now. And you can never say they're not doing their best to bring home a championship. I think this was undoubtedly the most notable move made by a team at the deadline and a real indicator that Vegas likes their chances of running it back, and they're arguably even deeper than they were last year. So a big-time get for Vegas to add Tomas Hertl, not even just as a rental piece. He's going to be a long-term fit unless, they got to trade him to make some more cap space in the future. But a big one there for the Vegas Golden Knights. I think the second biggest move at the deadline has to be Jake Gensel being acquired by the Carolina Hurricanes. And I do just want to apologize to all the Pittsburgh Penguins fans out there because it could not have been easy to watch a player as talented as Jake Gensel, to watch him go. And he's someone that I've really marveled at from afar over the last handful of years, someone who always performs even better in the Stanley Cup playoffs, right? He's a former 40-goal scorer, had a ton of success on that top line along Sidney Crosby for a long time. So I feel you, Penguins fans. I've seen some of my boys that you never thought were going to get dealt wind up getting traded. But yeah, a big-time ad for the Carolina Hurricanes gearing up for the postseason. They get Jake Gensel and Ty Smith in exchange for Michael Bunting, Vasily Ponomarev, Ville Koivunen, Cruz Lucius, who was a former first-round pick, a conditional 2024 first-round pick, and a conditional 2024 fifth. I think this is probably a better trade for the Carolina Hurricanes than it is the Pittsburgh Penguins, but I didn't think it was a terrible type of return, but a big addition up front for a guy who's a Stanley Cup champion, played a lot of meaningful postseason games, and can get it done in the goal-scoring department and just has that experience in Jake Gensel. A huge top 6 ad for the Carolina Hurricanes. My third biggest trade would probably just be the Winnipeg Jets making a move in general, but helps when they get a player like Tyler Toffoli from the New Jersey Devils as well. And oddly enough, Toffoli, even though he's been a really productive and consistent player, he's just bounced around the NHL these last handful of years. Now on to another team up in Winnipeg, but Winnipeg is a team that notoriously Kevin Cheveldayoff doesn't do a lot of moves during the deadline usually. And I think this is a really good sign that he's liking the team that he has and he wants to make them even better for the postseason. It only cost a 2025 second and a 2024 third in order to get Tyler Toffoli because 50% of his contract was retained. And he had a career high 73 points last year and has tallied 40 points 8 times in his 12-year NHL career. So another good goal scorer to go help Kyle Connor and the big guns up in Winnipeg that have had a really good season up to this point and look like they're going to be trying to get into the Stanley Cup playoffs with some edge. The Vegas Golden Knights landing Noah Hanifin the second time they wind up on this list. But I think this is another really sharp move by them to add a guy like Hanifin with Alec Martinez out of the lineup right now. They had to get a third-party broker involved here, but pretty good piece of business, I think, by Vegas. The Flames got a conditional 2025 first and a third, along with defenseman Daniil Miromanov, while Vegas gets Noah Hanifin at 50% retained, and the Flyers get a 2024 fifth-round pick for being the third party. That's kind of what the Blackhawks could have got if they went that route. But again, I don't think Kyle Davidson is really all that worried about having a plethora of fourth and fifth round picks, considering how many top 3 round selections he has over the next couple of years. And then fifth, last but certainly not least for me, it had to be the 1-for-1 swap between the Buffalo Sabres and the Colorado Avalanche. Bowen Byram, the former 4th overall selection, someone who a lot of Blackhawks fans were hoping they would have taken at number 3 in the 2019 NHL draft. He's now a member of the Buffalo Sabres, and going back to Colorado is what they're hoping is going to be their second line center, kind of a gap in their lineup they've been trying to fill ever since Gabriel Landeskog's injury. It's going to be Casey Mittelstadt, a former high-round pick for the Buffalo Sabres, has really burst onto the scene these last couple years and was actually the Sabres' leading scorer this year with 47 points in 62 games. So Colorado's hoping they'll be able to get their second-line center out of this deal, and there's no denying the ceiling that Bowen Byram has because of his skating abilities. He could be a minute logging defenseman in the NHL over 20 minutes a game. And oh yeah, he's already a Stanley Cup champion with playoff experience. However, the problems are just with him remaining healthy. That's kind of been the issue throughout his professional career thus far. So I think this is a good trade for both sides. I think there is upside, but I do think the Colorado Avalanche got the safer of the two bets given the injury track record for Bowen Byram. I'm sure it wasn't easy to trade a player with that type of ceiling, though, but it's kind of clear they're going to need a second-line center if they want to go and win the Stanley Cup once again this year. So those were my 5 biggest moves made from the trade deadline. Some of the others that were noteworthy, the Panthers getting Vladimir Tarasenko and adding another good offensive weapon. I think Carolina getting Evgeny Kuznetsov, despite him being in the player assistance program recently. I think that's a good get for their offense as well. And I think they already have all the tools on defense to gear up for a long Stanley Cup run. The Devils go and add Jake Allen to try to solidify their net to sneak into the playoffs. And then the Lightning getting Matt Dumba was another kind of noteworthy move. But as far as my biggest winners, I think the Vegas Golden Knights have to be number one undoubtedly. I mean, they send it to go and get Tomas Hertl last minute. They go and bring in Noah Hannafin on the back end as well. And they added Anthony Mantha from the Washington Capitals too. So another go for it deadline out of the Golden Knights. I think the Colorado Avalanche are pretty good winners here too. Not only did they get their second line center in Casey Mittelstadt, but they added Yakov Trenin and Brandon Duhaime to kind of round out their forward group and got a nice defenseman in Sean Walker from the Philadelphia Flyers. And the Carolina Hurricanes, I think, also have to be up there as well. I've always really liked their defense, and to go and get 2 more good forwards in Jake Gensel and Evgeny Kuznetsov, 2 Stanley Cup champions that can help provide them experience as well. To me, those were the 3 biggest winners coming out of the 2024 NHL trade deadline. All right, Blackhawks fans, before I wrap up today's show, don't go anywhere because I still have to get into Scott Wheeler's top drafted NHL goaltender prospects. But first, I got to talk to you all about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and to level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has always got you covered. Plus, with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll always find exactly what you need every time. Plus, with eBay Guaranteed to Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or else you'll get your money back. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. With all the parts you need at the prices you actually want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and to bring home that win. So again, go and check out ebaymotors.com. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, thank you all for tuning into today's episode. If you're still watching right now, thank you very much. And if you haven't already, please make sure to go and smash that like button, comment down below, and most importantly, subscribe to the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel so that way you can get all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And also, make sure to go and check out the new Locked On Sports Today, because Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On. Plus, our national shows covering every single league. So make sure to go and check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, segment 3, Scott Wheeler of The Athletic, who I've actually used for my top for a top 10 breakdown, ahead of the 2024 NHL draft. Well, he also recently released his top 15 drafted goaltender prospects list earlier last week, and there were 2 Blackhawks prospects who wound up cracking this top 15. And I thought it would be fun to see where Wheeler has all of these goaltenders ranked in comparison to those 2 Hawks goaltender prospects and the rest of the NHL and some of the top goalies we've seen go in the NHL draft over the last couple of years, what they're up to now, how their seasons have been going, and just how he kind of sorts them all out at this point in their respected careers. I think it'll just give us a little bit better insight on not all that surprising. The 2 goalies that wind up on this list for the Blackhawks are Drew Commesso and Adam Guyan. But coming in at number 1 for Scott Wheeler in his top 15 drafted goalie prospects list is Jesper Wallstedt of the Minnesota Wild, one of the highest goaltender prospects to go in the draft in recent years. He ended up being the 20th overall selection in 2021. I thought he was going to be a shoo-in to be the first goalie off the board, but that actually wound up being Sebastian Cossa to the Detroit Red Wings. But yeah, Wallstedt has been developing rather nicely in the AHL over the last couple of years with the Iowa Wild, a team the Rockford Ice Hogs get to see a lot of. So they're quite familiar with Wallstedt. And so far this year, the 21-year-old has a 2.79 GAA, a 907 save percentage, and 2 shutouts in 35 AHL games. And this is his second season at the AHL level in the Wild's organization. And honestly, kind of surprising to me is the guy who comes in at number 2, Yaroslav Askarov, who was the 11th overall selection in 2020. I'm kind of honestly a little surprised that he didn't come in at number 1 because what he's been doing in the AHL has been getting a lot of attention, and he's been really solid there for the last 2 years. And he also is still only 21 years old. But how about these numbers? A 2.23 goals against average, 917 save percentage, and 5 shutouts in 32 AHL games for the Milwaukee Admirals, another team the Ice Hogs are quite familiar with in the Central Division. And that makes for an interesting debate as to what the Nashville Predators should do with a guy like UC Saros, considering they have Yaroslav Askarov in their pipelines. To me, he's the best goalie prospect in the world right now. And I was rather surprised that the Preds didn't end up trading Saros at this year's draft for some sort of assets. It's going to be really interesting to see how they handle their netminders position over the next couple of years. After those 2, I thought that was fairly obvious. They were 1 and 2. Coming in at number 3 is actually Jacob Fowler for the Montreal Canadiens, still 19 years old. He was the 69th overall selection in the 2023 NHL draft, wound up being the 4th goaltender off the board. But what a freshman campaign he is having for Boston College this year. With a 2.17 goals against average and a 924 save percentage for one of the top teams in all of college hockey. I think that probably helps in those numbers looking a little bit better, but Montreal has to be licking their chops over getting Jacob Fowler in the 3rd round as the 4th goaltender off the board in the 2023 NHL draft. Number 4 is Spencer Knight for the Florida Panthers. Kind of crazy how long he's been on the professional scene up in the NHL with the Panthers, and he still hasn't necessarily found his way, but that's how things go for goaltenders. It's not a linear path to succession, right? It takes time for everyone else. And Spencer Knight's only 22 years old, so he was undoubtedly rushed to the NHL after being the 13th overall pick in 2019. It's been a little bit of a struggle for him with the Charlotte Checkers in the AHL this season, though, with a 265 GAA and 897 save percentage in 37 AHL games, and he has yet to see any NHL action this year. At number 5 is Devin Levi for the Buffalo Sabres, 22 years old, so kind of older than most people on this list, but he's a former 7th-round pick for the Florida Panthers in 2020, who really burst onto the scene at the World Juniors, and he's been really solid at both levels this season. A 252 GAA, 925 save percentage, and 3 shutouts in 17 AHL games. And then he's also gotten 20 games of action at the NHL level with the Buffalo Sabres as well. One of the older guys on this list, not sure how much longer he's going to be on here, but just an example of how long it takes to kind of burst onto the scene as a goaltender. In a similar fashion, Dustin Wolf comes in at number 6 for the Calgary Flames. The 22-year-old was also the 7th-round pick back in 2019 for the Flames. And he's got a 2.43 GAA, 923 save percentage, and 4 shutouts in 35 AHL games this season. Sebastian Cossa, as I mentioned, wound up being the first goalie off the board in 2021, going 15th overall. Kind of been up and down for him so far in the Red Wings organization. 2.59 goals against average, 910 save percentage, and 1 shutout in 27 AHL games with the Grand Rapids Griffins. And then another Detroit netminder comes in at number 8 in Trey Augustine, who was the the third goaltender off of the board in this year's draft. Still 19 years old, but has been really good as a freshman for Michigan State with a 2.92 goals against, 917 save percentage in 31 games as a freshman. And coming in at number 9, we have our first Blackhawks goalie prospect in Adam Gajan, of course, the first goalie prospect off of the board in 2023, the only one who's not playing college hockey or AHL are getting AHL action this year after being drafted, as Gajan is still in the USHL. He does have a 28-4 record for the Green Bay Gamblers, but he's got a 3.42 GAA, an 896 save percentage, and no shutouts in 34 appearances this year. I think that has to be somewhat slightly concerning that he doesn't have a shutout at the USHL level, and his save percentage is below 900. I know that's a league below, obviously, college hockey, but I do wonder if the Blackhawks are having any doubts about making Gajan the first goaltender off of the board. Still very early in all of these guys' careers, and Gajan will be going to Minnesota Duluth next year as a freshman. I'd expect him to spend 3, if not 4 years there, and then probably a year or 2 in Rockford if all goes well before he ever arrives onto the NHL scene. So we're probably thinking a 2028, 2029 arrival potentially for Adam Gajan. But yeah, comparatively to what Trey Augustine, Jacob Fowler, and even Michael Hrabal have done so far this year, you can't not be a little bit worried about Adam Gajan, but hopefully he'll bounce back at a higher level next year with Minnesota Duluth, or even finishes this year on a strong point. And then at number 10 is Drew Commesso. I personally would have had Drew Commesso over Adam Gajan. That's the way I kind of look at things at this point in time. Comesso's 21, second-round pick for the Hawks, number 46 overall back in 2020. Obviously spent 3 years playing college hockey with Boston University, and he now is in his first season with the Rockford IceHogs in the AHL on the professional scene. And so far this season, he's got an 11-12-4 record with a 281 goals against average, 900 save percentage, and 1 shutout. And what's kind of funny to me is Gajan and Commesso being so close on this rankings. I've had them 6th and 9th in my midseason Blackhawks prospect ranking. So I've had it pretty close between these two as well. But my slight edge does go to Drew Commesso over Adam Gajan. It's been a little bit of a struggle for Commesso in the AHL, but they've also been very injury-plagued and have had a lot of young defensemen in front of him, which probably hasn't helped the numbers look like what they do. So I'm still very high on Drew Commesso. Hopefully he'll finish up this season on a high note and play his best hockey of the season as the games become more and more meaningful as Rockford is creeping towards the Calder Cup playoffs. But there you have it. There's the top 10 in Scott Wheeler's drafted NHL goalie prospect list. Adam Gajan and Drew Commesso round things out on the back end, but I don't think they're all that far off. So nice to see that the Blackhawks have some depth in goal as well in their prospect pool. Drew Commesso could possibly be arriving on the NHL scene next season. For Adam Gajan, it's going to be a lot more of a long-term process. We're probably not seeing him until at the earliest 2028, 2029. All right, Blackhawks fans, that's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for tuning into the show. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcast. And make sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. And that way you can get the latest episode as soon as it's uploaded each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Go and give me a follow on X at JackBushman2. And make sure to also go and follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. So until tomorrow's episode, go Hawks. Let's see if they can pick up 2 consecutive wins for the first time in 3 months. And I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.